Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Glad to have you as always. Today we're going to be showing you how to convert a TH350C to a non-locking TH350. So there's two avenues of approach when it comes to doing this. There is the book method, and then there is what I will call the Hasty method. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate the book method for you. We'll go through the list of components and parts you need, and then we'll just get into the procedure. And then at the end of the video, I'll discuss the Hasty method. There's nothing really to show you there. It's relatively simple. Doesn't really require any visual aids. It's just talking about it, and it's otherwise self-explanatory. So we'll get a little bit closer to the bench, and then I'll walk through the parts that you'll need to do this conversion. Now, one thing I'll say is I'm not going to get into the merits of why you'd want to do it. That's going to be very, application specific, builder and user specific. So I'm only going to kind of cover what you would need to do so that you can make this happen for your transmission if it's something you wanted to do. So to successfully convert a TH350C to a TH350 variant that does not take a converter with a clutch in it, you're going to need several things. So first, you're going to need an input shaft from a non-locking TH350. In most situations, folks will just simply acquire an entire forward drum and shaft assembly. Now, the drums themselves are exactly the same between the non-lockup and the lockup versions of this transmission. There's literally not a single thing that's different. So you can press the lockup shaft out and install the non-lockup shaft. That's fine. You can also just simply swap drums. Now, if you do swap drums, just bear in mind that the forward clutch pack, the apply plate in these transmissions is selective, and there's 3 different versions, and I'll flash them across the screen just for a quick reference. So if you transfer over your clutch pack to, from one drum to another, you may have been within spec and clearance on your, say, TH350, forward drum assembly, but when you go to swap everything over, you may be out of spec in the new drum, so just be aware that there are different thicknesses of clutch plate. And you can also machine your piston too if, you're too tight. So you'll need the input shaft. You also need a complete pump assembly from a non-locking TH350. You will need a roughly 5" by, 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch diameter, either a piece of hose or a slug or a, something to block the torque converter clutch control valve and the auxiliary valve body from moving. Okay, you're also going to need some gasket making material so you can block off the TCC apply circuit between the solenoid and the auxiliary valve body here. So I'm just going to use Felpro's Universal Gasket Making Kit. It's part number 3060. You can get it on Amazon. It's like $6 or $7. And you have 4 different types of gasket making sheets in there, so we're just going to use the top one. The rest of the stuff is going to basically carry forward into your into your build. So you're going to use the same direct drum. The drums are the same between the 2 variants, and then as far as your applied piston and your clutch pack, again, you're going to carry those over, or maybe you modify them. It doesn't really matter. There's nothing changing there to facilitate this, migration from lockup to non-lockup. As far as your spacer plate and gaskets, you're going to use the same plate from your TH350C along with the gaskets that are associated with this transmission. So you can identify them by the white stripes that are running horizontally across the long axis of the gasket. If your TH350 non-locking pump took a Babbitt style selective thrust washer, then you're going to need to bring that forward as well, and you're going to have to choose a thrust washer that allows you to dial in play where it needs to be. Okay, gasket is going to be the same. I have a TH350 spacer plate here from a Transgo kit. This is intended for a non-locking TH350, and I believe these kits dual feed the direct clutch through the plate, so you have what's called a transfer plate over here. So you would not use this. If you wanted to run a shift kit like a Transgo 1 and 2 or Transgo 2 and 3, then you would simply purchase the Transgo 2 and 3 kit for a TH350C. All right, everything else is going to be largely the same. You're going to leave out one of the check balls There is 5 total check balls in a TH350C. One is for the converter clutch. You're going to leave that out. And basically everything else, including the harness, you're going to reinstall the harness. It's not going to do anything, okay? But you know, you can reinstall that so that you can hold down the piece of gasket that you're going to make for that solenoid. All right, let me kind of get organized here on the bench, and then we'll begin. All right, so we have the case fully assembled up to the front gear train. So the first thing we want to do is grab our stator pump cover assembly from our non-lockup TH350's pump. And we want to look right over here in this area. This is going to be the area of the drain back feed port location. And then we want to find the corresponding port here on the case. So that's going to be this port right here. It's going to be the far left port on this contiguous portion of the pump mating surface here on the case. So if your pump cover does not have a pre-cast window here, if it's solid through and through, then what you're going to need to do is drill either a 1/4 or 5/16 inch hole so that you can free up that location and access your drain back. All right. So once you've confirmed that either A, you have that cut out, or B, you've drilled your hole and everything's good, there's no interference between the hole in the case and the hole in the pump. In other words, there's no obstruction, either partial or total, then you can proceed to the next step. Okay, go ahead and assemble your drums and stack them. So you have your direct drum, your forward drum, everything's ready to go. Just make sure your bearing is in there. And then reassemble your pump, make sure it's good to go. Put whatever either selective washer and or pump bearing and shim in place based on the kind of pump you have. And then we're ready to kind of reinstall this stuff into the case. The procedure for doing that's identical, and plate check's identical. I mean, no difference here. All we're doing is we're adapting the pump and the input shaft to accept the non-locking TH350 converter. All right, go ahead, put your band. The side here goes on the far ledge. And then follow it up with your intermediate clutch. The 4 lugs are going to be on the roughly 3 o'clock position. So in this particular example, I'm swapping a V8 or a setup from a V8 into a transmission that initially went behind a V6 or a very small displacement V8. So I'm going to have a lot of room for additional friction and steel. Because this is just for demonstration purposes, I'm not actually going to worry about it. Alright, so make sure that's in. And then your pump to case gasket. Let that settle in place. And then just go ahead and install your pump. All right, check end play as you normally would. If you're looking for information or instructions on how to go about performing all the assembly that you need to do, then watch my TH350 rebuild series. It covers the entire rebuild process end to end. It also covers checking end play and what to do if you're out of spec and all that good stuff. So pumps in, you have now the non-locking input shaft along with the non-locking pump assembly, and now we're ready to go with the rest of the transmission, bolting everything to the belly of the case. Okay, so as far as check balls are concerned, the TH350C normally takes 5, at least 5 from the factory. You have your 2-3 check ball, your 1-2 accumulator check ball. This is your 2-3 accumulator check ball, 1-2 accumulator check ball. This is going to be your modulator check ball, and then over here is going to be your reverse check ball, and then up here at this location is going to be your TCC release check ball. So depending upon your specific application, and how you're trying to calibrate the transmission to shift, you can leave all these check balls out except for the modulator check ball. If you leave that one out, then you're not going to have any line rise. But all these others you can leave out if you want. Now, the check ball that has to be left out for this conversion to work is going to be your converter release check ball. You do not need to install that, and you should leave that out. Okay, now we'll go ahead and prep the auxiliary valve body. There's a couple things we have to do so that we can get that ready to install. Meanwhile, I'll go ahead and I'll install the gasket and spacer plate. Spacer plate, you can drill that however you want in terms of your shift firmness. And again, we're going to use the same gaskets that you would normally use for a TH350C, and those are the gaskets that have the horizontal white stripe, going this way. All right, now we're going to prep the auxiliary valve body. First thing we need to do is remove the little plug and the spring for the converter clutch control valve. So the little roll pin here, retaining pin, is such that it's just held in place by spring tension. So what you want to do is just simply partially press so that you see that little roll pin kind of move a little bit. That'll indicate that tension is relaxed. And then wrap it on something, it'll come right out. Okay, the spring itself should force the little plug out, but sometimes they get hung up. And if that's the case, just take a screwdriver and just kind of work it until it comes all the way out. All right, you're gonna remove the spring. If you want, keep it aside. I mean, I'm the type that I don't ever throw anything out like this, but you're not gonna reinstall it. What you're gonna do, and this is just a proxy, but what you're gonna do is you're gonna locate something that measures approximately 1/2 inch in length and 1/2 inch in diameter. You can use some sort of like slug or spacer or plug or whatever. Doesn't really matter as long as it prevents this converter clutch valve from moving. So just go ahead and install whatever it is you've come up with, and then reinsert your pin. And that's good to go. Okay, the next step is going to be to create a gasket of some sort. So easiest way to go about doing that is to just simply trace kind of an outline, if you will. Sorry, I didn't realize I was off shot. You're going to put the gasket here. So gasket is going to block off this location here on the solenoid so that no converter clutch apply charge is actually fed into the torque converter. Okay, so it's just going to go like this. Gasket's going to go right over top, and it's going to plug off this hole. So let me go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back and resume. All right, now that you have your little gasket template cut out, go ahead and make a couple holes, roughly 1/4 of an inch in diameter, so that you can pass the bolts through them. So I'm just using an awl, holding this kind of like so, and I'll just start like a pilot hole. And then I'll come in from the other side, because I ultimately want whatever material in this thing that's going to kind of fold over. I want it facing down. And I'll just come in with a drift that's conical until I can get it wide enough so that it will allow the bolt to pass through. Okay, that's all you're trying to accomplish there. So now we're ready to bolt everything back onto the belly of the case. So valve body for these, as far as like how it functions and you know, all of the valve trains and all that good stuff are exactly the same as a regular TH350, or I should say a non-lockup TH350. The TH350Cs do have pressure switches and pressure switch locations. Some variants were designed to lock up only in high gear. Others were designed to lock up both in second gear and third gear. So depending upon which specific you know, make and model that your TH350C came out of, you may have provisions for both second and third gear lockup, and you may have multiple different pressure switches. So, you know, just be aware of that. Ultimately, it doesn't matter because you're not going to be using any of them. All right, now you're ready to reinstall your auxiliary valve body and the little gasket for the converter clutch lockup solenoid. So just position it like so. Get your gasket in position, and then go ahead and install your solenoid. Okay, you're going to have 3 bolts. Those are shorter. They're going to go here, here, and here. And then you're going to have 2 longer bolts. Those are, again, I want to say 50% longer, and those are going to go through here. Okay, all the valve body, the case bolts, whether it be auxiliary valve body, main valve body, or this hold down plate, get 13 foot-pounds or 156 inch-pounds. So you have your 3 upper valve body bolts, they get a 1/2 inch, and then you have 9/16 for the solenoid bolts. And I meant to say auxiliary valve body. I'm not going to torque these down because I'm actually only putting this thing together for the sake of the video. The input drum and pump from that originally came out of this case is going to go back into it, and then this is going to go back in the cores yard. But if you were doing this for real, this is the procedure you would follow. Okay, if you want to kind of trim this gasket here, that's also fine. Just take like an X-Acto knife or a box cutter. And just slice it away. You want to be careful. You don't want to damage the gasket on, you know, it's sitting down there on the case. All right. With the auxiliary valve body bolted down, the hold down plate also installed, then once you install the main valve body, you're going to plug this back in. It's going to be completely unused. You're not going to plug your wiring harness into the case connector because there's no need for it. The only reason I plug this back in is just tidy everything up underneath the case. And then you would obviously have your main valve body installed, you know, and everything else needs to go, you know, shift linkage, S-hook, filter, pan, and done. So that is the book method, and the book here in question that describes this method is the ATSG manual for the TH350C, and it's at the very end of the book. Now, I also mentioned at the very beginning of the video that there is a second method or a second avenue of approach that you could take when it comes to converting a TH350C to a non-locking you know, setup, and that is the Hasty method. So the Hasty method is very, very simple. And it does not involve anywhere near the amount of parts exchange or, you know, quote-unquote level of effort that this one does. So what you're going to do is simply take your existing converter, Okay, you're going to take it to a converter builder, and you're going to tell him to rebuild the torque converter, you know, go through his normal process, except you're going to instruct him to leave the converter clutch out of the converter. And then when you go to put the unit back together, you're going to leave the converter clutch O-ring off of the end of the input shaft here. You're not going to reinstall that. And then you're also going to leave out that check ball, number 5 check ball for the converter clutch release. That's not necessary. You're going to do the same thing here. You want to block off your solenoid just in case, and you also want to restrict the valve from moving. So those 2 steps are going to remain common between the 2 methods. So the only reason you would choose the more long-winded book method over the Hasty method is, and this is just purely my opinion, and that is if you are doing something high performance. Okay, in my opinion, the input shaft for the non-locking TH350s is a little bit stronger, a little bit stouter than you know, the input shaft that came in the locking TH350 or TH350Cs. So again, I mean, you know, to be honest, that is somewhat debatable, but that is the only rationale that you would use at all, you know, when choosing between the book method and the Hasty method, and why you would choose the book method over the Hasty method. The other aspect to consider is parts availability. You know, maybe your TH350C pump is trashed, you have a good used pump from a non-lockup TH350, and you also happen to have a drum and a shaft, you know, or you know, a drum shaft assembly. So then at that point you would just simply use the book method to convert your transmission over to one that takes a non-locking converter. So that's the video. Hope it helped. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them below. More than likely, this is going to be my last TH350 video, and that is because I have, I want to say, at least 15 other videos out on the TH350 covering, you know, every aspect of this transmission for the most part. We have a, you know, full rebuild series from start to finish. We also have several topical videos that cover individual sub-assemblies, parts, or components within the transmission. So there's plenty of material to review and to watch if you are embarking on a TH350 project or rebuild of your own. So as always, I appreciate your time. If you do have anything else you would like me to cover about the TH350, you know, feel free to leave it in the comments. If I get enough suggestions for a video that I haven't done, then I'll do one. But there, you know, the demand would have to be there. Otherwise, my existing playlist for the TH350 should cover most anything that comes up. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day or evening, and looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks again.